Good evening, morning, afternoon, whenever. If you watch this, great. Hope you're all doing well, whoever you are, me. I decided to kind of do a last minute live stream unrelated to my usual content because I want to see what happens. And like to go on record beforehand. So we will see. So, what I wanted to talk about tonight was the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran that apparently is going to be signed on Friday, but I think was released this afternoon. At least I think I saw it released. It's a 14-point plan. I thought it'd be interesting to go through it, and then on top of that, as I've done recently, I've used Claude to do jokes about the subject matter. And tonight we're going to do some jokes. Whoever we are going to do some jokes about the memorandum of understanding. We'll see how those goes. So that's kind of the syllabus for tonight. First the jokes, and then maybe some more jokes, and then we'll look at the 14 points. I think it's 14 points of the memorandum of understanding, or at least this appears to be what the points will be as of today. And my extremely knowledgeable commentary. I'm kidding there, of course. Just my opinion about certain points, and I'll raise certain issues, and I will give you my input where, for whatever it's worth, which isn't very much, but that's where we're going to go. So I asked Claude for 5 incredibly funny jokes about the Iran-USA memorandum of understanding to be signed Friday. And I'm going to read 4 of them because they are what they are. After 100 plus days of war, peace is being secured by a document that's a page and a half long. The conflict generated more paperwork in parking validations than it is its own resolution. Pretty tough. 2, the leaders signed the agreement electronically before the in-person ceremony. 2 nations ended the war the same way you approve a software license agreement, scrolling fast and clicking I agree without reading it. Pretty harsh. 3, they're refusing to release the text until after Friday's signing. Nothing says powerful historic accord like trust me, you'll love it once it's too late to object. And 4, it's called a memorandum of understanding, which is diplomatically is the legal equivalent of we'll circle back. Both sides agreed to agree to think about possibly agreeing within 60 days. So I looked at that and I said, make them more absurd and focus on the ambiguity of the nuclear provisions. And what about Iran funding its proxies? 5 funnier jokes. It didn't give me 5, but I picked out 3, arguably 3. The nuclear provisions are so ambiguous that inspectors will arrive in Iran, be handed a page and a half document, and spend 3 weeks trying to determine whether understanding is a verb, a noun, or a vibe. The centrifuges, meanwhile, are listed under miscellaneous. 2, Iran agreed to let inspectors back in, but the MOU doesn't specify where. So technically, they've been granted full access to a very nice lobby in Tehran, a complimentary fruit basket, and a guided tour of a building that is definitely not the one. And 3, on the nuclear question, both sides reached a historic compromise. Iran promised it has no nuclear program, and the U.S. promised to keep inspecting the program that doesn't exist. The 60 days of technical talks are just to negotiate the snacks. And then I said, more unhinged, 5 more jokes. So this is what it deems, this is what the Anthropic Claude 4.8 thinks are more unhinged than the other ones. I think. Yes, it is. The full nuclear text is being kept secret until after the signing, because in a stunning diplomatic breakthrough, nobody actually wrote it. The page and a half is one page of clip art and a coupon. When inspectors demanded the enrichment limits, Iran pointed at a sticker and said, "No love." And the United States declared this the most powerful document in human history before adjourning for the snack negotiations, which are themselves now a separate war. Two, I thought that was pretty funny, actually. Two, international inspectors arrived, asked to see the nuclear sites, and were handed a laminated card reading, "The nuclear sites are wherever the heart is." They are now driving a rental car through Iran, asking gas station attendants if they've personally seen any enrichment. And the gas station attendants keep on saying, "Define enrichment." And last but not least, the proxy funding clause was resolved when Iran agreed to stop wiring money to Hezbollah and start mailing it as a series of unmarked birthday cards. Each rocket is now legally a gift, each missile a thinking of you, and the entire axis of resistance has been reclassified as a really aggressive book club. So I found some of those pretty funny, to be honest. I found most of them not, but I found some of those pretty funny. And again, I asked it like a couple minutes beforehand. So let's talk about what a memorandum of understanding is. So generally a memorandum of understanding, I'm going to use California as an example, not legal advice, obviously. I'm use California as an example. A memorandum of understanding is basically an agreement to agree, not a binding agreement. Now, are there times it can be a binding agreement? Yes. And it would have to kind of say it's a binding agreement. And it would have to be very definitive on the terms. It couldn't leave a lot to negotiation. So it'd have to kind of be, all the material terms would have to be spelled out. So that's kind of what a memorandum of understanding is. So generally not, and again, I'm referring to California, generally not an enforceable contract, can be under very limited circumstances, but the terms have to be very specific and laid out. So today, and I've heard like rumors about the memorandum of understanding that was agreed upon, and I don't think it's been officially released, and I don't know if it's true, but I saw it this afternoon. It was released by Bloomberg, I think about 6 o'clock Eastern time, and I saw it on some other financial channels. So I don't know if it's accurate, but it's what's going out currently today. This is Tuesday, the 16th. It's not set to be signed until the Friday. And I don't know if it's going to end up in the exact same form. I don't know if this is the form. I don't know if, because there's no signatures. I didn't see any place for a signature, but, and anything could change. And maybe this is a trial balloon. Maybe it's still being negotiated. Maybe that's why it wasn't released, because it's not been officially released, even though apparently it's been electronically signed. But let's kind of go through the points. I'm just going to read the points, 14 points, and you can decide yourself. And I'm going to comment at certain points, just my own opinions, take them for what they're worth, you could certainly reject them and you may have a different opinion, but I'm going to go through all 14 points. I'll give you my opinion and then you can draw your own conclusion, whether one, this is definitive enough to constitute a binding contract with enough terms defined, and what you think about the terms. So here we go. Below is the text of the 14-point draft memorandum as seen by Bloomberg News. 1. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States, together with their allies in the current war, declare upon the signing of this memorandum of understanding an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, and undertake that from now on they will not launch any hostile action against each other and will refrain from the threat or use of force against each other. The final agreement will confirm the provisions of this article and the remaining articles. Okay, So that's the first paragraph. Sounds like a good intention. Um, let me step back. What do I expect to happen? I don't expect them to be able to negotiate a final agreement in 60 days. In fact, what I think, if these 14 points are the 14 points and you have crafty negotiators, you can negotiate this stuff forever. Certainly for 2 years, 2.5 years, for the rest of Trump's term. Can he negotiate these points? Easily. Probably could just negotiate the nuclear points for 2 years. So what I would expect is that if in fact apparently they have signed off, and if in fact it's signed at Geneva, and if in fact this is the agreement to agree, that's what I'm calling it, I think it can certainly be negotiated for the rest of Trump's term without being done in bad faith, but aggressive negotiation. And a lot of time is going to be required, especially, you've heard the term of technical negotiations. I think those kind of things will proceed slowly. So I'm predicting that even if it's signed, it won't be fully executed either till late in Trump's term or not at all during Trump's term, even if signed. That's my deal. As to paragraph 1, which basically says we're going to stop shooting each other. One, I don't think Israel is a party to this deal. One, but two, the question that occurred to me is where it says that none of the parties, and it doesn't reference who the parties are and who the signatories are, which it should also, and that would make it more definitive, by the way. It says blank, they will not launch any hostile action against each other. So what happens if one of the parties, and I'll just do it this way. What happens if Israel launches a attack against Hezbollah? Would a response by Hezbollah be considered a hostile action and be a violation? Is Hezbollah a party to this? Are the militants in Iraq parties to this? We don't know. So I think that's kind of an unclear term about what hostilities would be. And I'm sure there's going to be negotiations about who's bound by it and what they have to do. But theoretically, that's a reasonably, good idea. 2, the Islamic and also hear about who you think, if these points are correct, who you think won the negotiations in terms of structuring the points or the issues that need to be adjudicated between the parties. Who do you think kind of won the battle? 2, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States will undertake to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and refrain from interfering in each other's internal affairs. Can't argue with that. Again, I don't know what interference is. I don't know what you're allowed to do. Are you allowed, for example, I know that like Qatar and Iran fund a lot of money, especially Qatar, into the universities. I think Iran funds to various NGOs, etc. Is that interference? How do we define that? What rights do parties have to fund in the country? And again, what does interference mean? Does it have to be intentional? Can it be inadvertent? Can it involve third parties? I don't know. What is the sovereignty and territorial integrity? Territorial integrity, I think I understand. That means we'd be going on somebody else's territory. Sovereignty, does that like spying from satellites? Is that not respecting someone else's sovereignty? Do I think like the U.S. is not going to be conducting satellite views of what's going on in Iran to the extent they can? No, I do think they're going to be doing that. So I think there's room to negotiate, even though theoretically not a very complicated provision. 3, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States undertake to negotiate and reach a final agreement within a maximum period of 60 days, extendable by mutual consent. So it says they will work to negotiate and reach agreement within 60 days. That doesn't mean they will, but that means they will do it. And it also means they can extend it if they both agree to it. What it doesn't say is what happens if they don't extend and there's no agreement. And what happens as to the items that immediately occur that are referenced in this memorandum of understanding. So something that's going to, upon the execution of these documents, certain things are going to happen. What happens if there's no agreement within 60 days? Are we going to roll back what is immediately going to happen, like the opening of the strait? It's certainly unclear. It's not addressed anywhere here in this this paragraph. And again, it seems to me it would be very easy, because I'm just doing it knowing nothing, honestly, and looking at a 2-page document, not knowing any of the real terms and any of the negotiators, and just kind of picking apart like stuff that I'm just looking at a document. And people who are much more sophisticated in this and of understanding the subject matter will be able to rip these issues apart, and again, require a lot of time to get through it. Item number 4, and this is where I referenced before when I was talking about immediately, because that's important if we don't complete some of the tasks. So item number 4, for example, immediately upon the signing of this memorandum of understanding, the United States will lift the naval blockade and prevent any interference or obstruction against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and restore traffic within a maximum of 30 days to its full capacity. The traffic of ships shall be proportional to the pre-war volume of traffic on the part of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The United States also undertakes to withdraw its forces from the surrounding areas within 30 days after the final agreement. So let's briefly take a look at this. First of all, it says immediately, so it's supposed to happen immediately, that we're supposed to remove the blockade and restore traffic within a maximum of 30 days to full capacity. Then it talks about, and I have no idea what this is, the traffic of ships shall be proportional to the pre-war volume of traffic on the part of Iran. I have no idea what that means. I'm sure I'm not the only one who doesn't know what that means. Again, just the introduction of ambiguity just creates time and the ability to stretch out negotiations. The last part of it, the United States also undertakes to withdraw its it also undertakes, which means it's a vague term. Is it going to remove it or not? Or is it going to attempt to remove? And what are the surrounding areas? How is that defined? Is there like a distance? Is there a time? And it says within 30 days of the final agreement. So that suggests that our having to withdraw our military forces is connected to the final agreement, even though immediately we will remove the blockade. So that's kind of how that's structured. So that's something that I would say would favor Iran, because they would be able to bring in money from oil that they may not be able to do at this point in time. 5. And by the way, this is kind of a definitive or more definitive. It's not about we're going to like discuss a topic, and you will see the reason why I say that. But this is fairly definitive in terms of what's going to happen. Lifting the naval blockade is lifting the naval blockade. Whatever they put in place to block shipping traffic, they would have to remove. 5. Upon the signing of this memorandum of understanding, the Islamic Republic of Iran, we will immediately take steps to ensure that the movement of merchant ships from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa is resumed within 30 days to the pre-war volume, taking into account the need for the removal of technical obstacles and the neutralization of mines by Iran. Again, I don't know how long that's going to take. I really don't know what technical obstacles are. I don't know how those differ from mines. I don't know how long it takes to remove mines. I don't know if it's possible to do that and bring volume up within 30 days. That seems like quite a ask. So a bunch of outstanding issues. I don't know. 6, the United States, together with its regional partners, will create a comprehensive plan agreed upon by both parties for the rehabilitation and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran, while ensuring financing of at least $300 billion. The implementation mechanism of this plan, as part of this agreement, will be formulated within 60 days. So they're going to set up something to fund $300 billion in rehabilitation to be used to rebuild Iran. And I heard today that maybe that will come from private companies, but then the question will be, will those private companies get certain fringe benefits from the government, get government contracts, et cetera, for investing in Iran? And, where there's been questions about giving Iran monies, is this a funding source? Who should be responsible? If in fact the Iran is responsible for the misconduct that they were alleged to have engaged in, aren't they responsible, or should they be responsible for their own rebuild? Shouldn't it just come out of their oil money? If in fact we let them rebuild, shouldn't this be funded by their own oil money? If in fact they're at they're responsible for us being there? I don't know. And I don't really think it can be done in 60 days. I think it's going to be couched as a private funding source. But again, I don't believe that, because there's been a lot of deals where certain entities have contributed monies and then they've gotten clear benefits from the government, which obviously is concerning and shouldn't happen, or at least arguably shouldn't happen. But here it's the $300 billion to help rebuild. I think Iran said they wanted $400 billion. Maybe this is a compromise. I think I heard today that maybe like half of it's been committed by private companies. But again, if those private companies get kickbacks or whatever, then that's not cool. And couldn't the $300 billion be used elsewhere in the United States? I guess that's the ultimate question. $300 billion that will go to rebuilding Iran, shouldn't that be going from should it be also be going from the Gulf countries? Should they be the ones who are financing the rebuild of Iran, since they more directly are at risk from Iran? Wouldn't that make more sense? I don't think, I don't know what percentage that United States companies will be funding this, or what the U.S. will be funding. I don't know the terms, whatever. It's very vague. So this is like one of those terms that I think is really vague. It says basically we're going to set up some organization to fund this. It's probably too vague to do. Somebody's trying to come into my office, so I'm gonna. No, they left. So this fund is interesting. I don't think it will go over well. Maybe it's well intended. We'll have to see how it plays out. But I don't think there'll be I think there'll be a lot of pushback, and that's probably why, one of the reasons why the plan itself wasn't released. 7, and your own. Maybe you think it should be funded. Maybe you think it shouldn't be funded. $300 billion is a lot of money. I mean, at least a lot of money for me. I guess for Elon at this point in time, it's just a drop in the bucket. But for most people, $300 billion, that could go a long way. It would change your lifestyle. 7, the United States commits to ending, on a schedule to be agreed upon as part of the final agreement, all types of sanctions currently facing the Islamic Republic of Iran, including resolutions of the United Nations Security Council and the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and all unilateral U.S. sanctions, both primary and secondary. Now, I don't know why they would be excused from all sanctions related to, for example, the IAEA, unless that was conditional upon them specifically making their nuclear sites available, making inspections available, providing access to where materials are held. If you, as stated, it sounds like there's relief from sanctions without having to do anything, other than there being a final agreement. And who knows what the final agreement is going to say? Maybe the final agreement won't require them to dispose of as the government says, the nuclear dust, even though they said that was I think that was the number one goal of this entire stated war, was to make sure that Iran couldn't be a nuclear power and go get, as the government said, the nuclear dust and take it out. And it's like 1,000 pounds or something on the order of 1,000 pounds that could be, I guess, could be upgraded in a reasonably short period of time to weapons grade from where it was. And our government stated that it was like extremely urgent that we get that. That was the number one primary goal. So here it suggests that they will get relief from sanctions, including from the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and it doesn't tie it into anything. So does that cause me concern? Yes. And it's also so indefinite, so non-specific as to be useless as a paragraph. It says, the United States commits to ending on a schedule to be agreed upon as part of the final agreement all types of sanctions. A very unclear, non-specific, probably not enforceable, probably meaningless in terms of a potential contract. Just my own commentary. 8, the Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates that it will. So we get the nuclear. Remember the nuclear. I'm going to focus on this a little bit. So remember, and I just kind of talked about it. The Trump administration talked about how important it was to get the nuclear materials and make sure Iran couldn't ever have nuclear capabilities. And in paragraph 7, or one of these paragraphs, it says they won't. But let's just read it. Paragraph 8 says, and this is the paragraph that will guarantee that Iran will never have nuclear weapons, or lays out the specific terms, specifically delineating why Iran won't have nuclear weapons. Number 8, the Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates that it will never produce nuclear weapons. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States have agreed that the fate of enriched material and the fate of all other mutually agreed nuclear-related issues, including Iran's nuclear needs, will be adequately addressed in a final agreement. The final agreement will confirm the provisions of this article. Now, and when I read it, it's absolute nonsense. It says nothing. It doesn't require. Only that requires is discussion about the issue, and it's not a one-sided discussion, and it includes discussions about Iran's nuclear-related issues, even though they are like I think they're like the second largest natural gas reserves in the world. They have huge oil reserves, but they still need, for some reason, they need nuclear too. Nuclear enrichment for what reason I don't know, but apparently they do. Notwithstanding the second largest natural gas fields in the world and the huge amount of oil they produce, but be that as it may. So the way I read it is their promise never to produce nuclear weapons is what our government believes satisfies the requirement to make sure they never have nuclear weapons. I think it's pretty vague. I don't think it does it. Obviously, I think it's inadequate. I think it's kind of a sign of desperation. The way I read it, appears to me the Trump administration was looking for a way to get out, and they were looking for any type of agreement they could get out from this position they didn't like, and an agreement to agree, and keeping all basically hostilities at bay was sufficient, whether there is a future agreement or not. But it's sufficient to back out and not have to worry about this issue. And I think that's all it is. It's some vagaries and intention to meet. But anyway, I've stated my own opinions. 9. So anyway, the nuclear issues will be adequately addressed in a final agreement, and they'll talk about it. And that's all it's specified. So obviously that's an agreement to agree, strictly non-enforceable. 9, or at least my opinion, non-enforceable. 9, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States agree that pending a final agreement, they will maintain the status quo. Iran will maintain the status quo on its nuclear program, which I think they say they don't have, and the United States will not impose new sanctions on Iran or strengthen its forces in the region. So we'll just keep things as is. Okay, fine. 10, the United States undertakes that immediately after the signing of this memorandum of understanding, so this is something that's required to occur immediately, and until the date of the lifting of sanctions, so in that period of time before sanctions are actually lifted, that the U.S. will give waivers for exports of Iranian crude oil, chemicals, and all related services, including banking, insurance, transportation, and the like. So it will, the way it appears to me, it will permit Iran to be able to accumulate money to be used however they so choose to use it. And if you trust them to use it appropriately, we probably wouldn't be having this 14-point plan. I think they probably shouldn't be allowed to, the sanctions shouldn't be allowed until there's a final agreement. If the sanctions aren't lifted until there's a final agreement, there's more urgency in reaching a final agreement. If there's certain benefits that occur just by negotiating, that doesn't encourage a final agreement, just encourages negotiation. So I wouldn't lift any sanctions until there was a final agreement. Even if the final agreement was BS, at least it was a final agreement, and not this long drawn out process, which I expect, this long drawn out process. I remember, by the way, the Vietnam War, and I was a young kid, but the Vietnam War, they started negotiations. I don't know how long it went, but years. And I remember they used to have these disputes about the size and the shape of the table. Some people didn't want a rectangular table. Some people didn't want anybody to have like a position of power on the table. They ended up, I think, with a circular table, but they spent literally years negotiating like fine points. That's why I believe this agreement won't be completed within the current administration's term. I think, again, if you're competent and skillful, you can drag this out forever. Especially if you get certain benefits that come into play immediately, like if they're able to raise money and sanctions are lifted, and they can export oil, chemicals, derivatives, related services, banking, insurance, transportation. I mean, what's the urgency in them negotiating a final agreement if in the interim, after signing the memorandum of understanding, they can obtain money? I think especially this 10th point, makes no sense and is there's no reason to give Iran cash until they have a final agreement. If a final agreement can be reached, then they should be willing to wait till that's done to do so. And again, that would encourage real negotiation, not just BS extensions. So I think that 10th point about sanction relief or not sanction relief, but waivers before sanction relief after the execution of memorandum of understanding, I think that's a bullshit point. I strongly disagree. As much as I agree with the nuclear nonsense, disagree with the nuclear nonsense, this one I think is even worse because it funds them or permits them to get funding. I'm sure that was a request of theirs. Number 11, the United States undertakes that in light of the progress of negotiations towards a final agreement, frozen or restricted funds and assets of Iran will be released and made fully available. These funds, whether held in the master account or transferred, will be used for any final beneficiary payment determined by the central bank of Iran and will be fully available for use. The United States undertakes to issue all necessary permits and licenses on this basis. Yeah, I don't know how much is frozen, and I don't know what specifically Iran has done to earn the right to unfreeze their assets. At best, they, even if you're like, arguably at best, if you look at the situation, they killed like 40,000 of their own citizens, shot them down. So if they did that, do you want to encourage that kind of behavior by giving them money? And that's in addition to the fact, and I think it was number 2, that basically each side's going to stay out of the other side's internal affairs. So the way Iran has operated their internal affairs, as we've seen, is they killed a bunch of people in the streets, literally machine gunned them down. We've agreed, or apparently one of the points that's been agreed in the memorandum of understanding, is we're not going to bother them about that kind of stuff. And here, on top of that, they can get funding immediately upon signing the memorandum of understanding to do with it as they please. Find it troubling. Really troubling. And the unfreezing of assets, I don't know how much that is, makes no sense. Again, until there's full performance, there should be no unfreezing of assets. Because if you require full performance, you're going to get much quicker performance. You'll get a final answer. 12. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States agree that the implementation mechanism will be established to oversee the successful implementation of and future commitment to the final agreement. Again, I don't know what that is. It means like, we will work out details. That's basically what it says. Again, like most of this, too indefinite, not specific enough, more an agreement to agree, like philosophical points, something to put on paper to state that there's some agreement. And again, the way I see it is an agreement to agree, which on central points so far, I think is much more in favor of Iran. If this, again, is what the final memorandum of understanding will be, I think the issues and the way it's framed are much more favorable to Iran. 13, following the signing of the memorandum of understanding and upon receipt of assurances regarding the commencement of implementation of Articles 4, 5, 10, and 11 of the Memorandum of Understanding and the continued implementation of these steps, Iran and the United States will enter negotiations for a final agreement solely with respect to the remaining articles. So in Article 4 is the naval blockade, 5 is the merchant ships, 10 is lifting of sanctions, and 11 is the unfreezing of assets. So it basically says that after all the things have been taken care of, because those are all required immediately, then we can go forward and enter final negotiations about an agreement. So all those things have to occur. Where I said immediately, those all have to occur. And of those immediately, when I mentioned like 4 is like the naval blockade, 5 is Iran having to stop blocking Persian Gulf traffic, 10 is lifting sanctions against Iran, 11 is unfreezing assets. So if you were going to say who benefit out of those 4 immediately, I would say 3 benefit Iran, 1 the United States. So I would say on that fact, Iran wins. And again, paragraph 13 says, before we're going to negotiate the final terms, we got to get those immediatelys done. So those immediatelys, in my mind, are going to fund Iran because they can have those waivers from export controls. So I don't know. 14 and the last point, final agreement will be approved through a binding resolution, the UN Security Council. Okay, whatever. So they're going to submit this to the UN Security Council and they'll be binding. Now, I did hear, and I don't know how it plays out. I'm not an expert in that area, like a lot of things I'm not an expert in, but there were certain, there were certain provisions that Congress has voted upon with regard to Iran that may require approval or affirmation by Congress. I didn't see it referenced in here. And again, at the end, it just said it had to be approved by the Security Council, but there may be actual provisions that Congress has to approve or yes or no. I don't think it's particularly, one, I think it's indefinite. It's not an agreement that's enforceable. Two, I think it's favorably structured to favor Iran. Three, I think, again, they could spend the time running out the clock on this, and that's what I expect that to happen. I think they're going to run out the clock. So that's my view and take. So it's Tuesday. It's this is going to be signed Friday. Let's see if the terms turn out this way or if they're completely different and I just wasted your time and my time. We will see. But at least we went through an exercise of evaluating if this were the terms. This is what we do. To all you out there who stayed and watched and have your opinions, feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. I'd like to hear your view, what you think. Feel free to leave a detailed comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me who you think won. Tell me you think if this is the final deal. Tell me if you think, why we got here. And have a great night. Talk to you later and see you soon. That's it. That's all, folks. That's all, folks.